Welcome. Rebecca Hope is the founder and the executive director of Mid-Metro Academy. I bet you didn't know that. And where she teaches English and study skills. She's also an adjunct English professor for the University of Northwestern, where she teaches college writing and research. Her short fiction and poetry has been published in print and online magazines and anthologies. And her short memoir pieces have won contests and have appeared in Juno magazine and Memoir magazine, as well as in online literary magazines. Last year, she released her book-length memoir, Stolen by Schizophrenia. Her debut novel, Silken Strands, received several awards before it was published, and her novella, Shattered Faith, won first place in the American Christian Fiction Writers' First Impressions Contest. Her newest novel, Matildas Eden, was released last month by Gabriel's Horn Publishing and is available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle versions. Rebecca does meticulous research for her historical novels and weaves real historical events and people into her stories. Rebecca has become an expert on New Harmony. This is her second novel featuring the experimental utopia in Indiana, and she was awarded the Arlene Feiner Research Grant, sponsored by the Working Men's Institute of New Harmony, Indiana, for her project Women of Paradise, Contributions of Female Boat Voters to New Harmony. That research was presented in New Harmony last year and will eventually be released as a nonfiction book. I'm pleased to introduce Rebecca May Hope, my beautiful wife, to you this evening.
Thank you. Thank you. Now there it goes. Okay. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming. Maybe that'll spare my voice a little bit. Welcome. And tonight I am going to share with you some secrets and surprises behind my latest book, Matildas Eden, and the real life woman who it's about, Matilda Greentree Price. I owe this book to this man, James Price. He was a nephew of Matilda Price. And when he was older, about that age that you see him there, he wanted to find out more about Matilda because she had taken him in and raised him after his parents died. And so he considered Matilda his second mother. And so he went on this relentless quest to find out everything he could about her. She had passed away several decades earlier. And as he was doing that, he uncovered a handwritten oral history that Matilda had dictated to her husband, who wrote it all down longhand, and passed it to their children, and it ended up in the hands of Anna, the daughter, who passed it on to James. And he typed it up in 1894. Typed it all up. It's a 12-page typewritten journal now, and he typed it on the 68th wedding anniversary of Matilda. And that was, her wedding anniversary was April 2nd, 1826. And so here we are right at the 200th anniversary. And I feel as if I have completed the circle, that he wanted to honor this woman who he felt so close to and such a bond with. So we are here tonight because of Matilda and because of James and this legacy being passed on. But when I got this journal and read it, I wasn't even researching her. I was researching a different Price, Hannah Price, who was Matilda's sister-in-law. And so I had requested records from the archives at Friends Historical Library at Swarthmore College. And I had to hire like a grad student to go in there and take pictures of everything and email them to me. And here I got this journal and I'm reading through it and I'm like, it's just like a Dickens novel. I mean, everything's laid out. The things that happened to her and the things that she did in her life were just amazing. And I was like, I am probably the only person alive who knows this story. I'm like, I have to tell it and get her story out. And so I'm very pleased to be able to have gotten it out in time to celebrate her 200th wedding anniversary. So thanks for being here and helping us celebrate. So, oopsie. The first thing you need to know about Matilda is that she was an amazing needlewoman. I mean, she was a superhero with a needle and thread. She loved sewing, and she was a child prodigy at sewing. When she was only 8 years old, she was sewing shirts for her father. And of course, there were no Singer sewing machines. We're talking like 18, 17. And so all by hand, when she was 8 years old, sewing these shirts for her father. So I, through my research, was able to find out what Matilda wore when she got married in 1826. And I commissioned a friend of mine who is also amazing with a needle, but also a sewing machine, to recreate the ensemble that Matilda wore at her wedding. So now, don't give it away. She knows the secret. So one thing you should know about, you may know this already, about wedding gowns and how white wedding gowns came to be. Queen Victoria was the one who popularized white wedding gowns in 1840 when she married Prince Albert in wearing white. And then everybody wanted to wear white, and it became a tradition after that. However, in the early 1800s in Washington, D.C., and some other prominent American cities, people who were wealthy and prestigious were already wearing white wedding gowns or white gowns, ball gowns. Okay, so I have pictures here of white gowns from the 1820s. They might have been wedding gowns or they might have been ball gowns. But I'm going to ask you, which of these do you think is closest to what Matilda wore at her wedding in 1826? All right, and then I'm going to reveal the answer to you. But first, you're going to commit and take a vote, okay? So you have to commit. So, but they are all authentic from 1820s. Okay, so how many think Matilda's gown was, her ensemble was closest to A? Raise your hand. All right, how many think it was closest to B? How many think it was closest to C? All right, you voted twice. how many think it was closest to D? Oh, okay. All right, so are you ready for the answer? I'm going to literally unveil it before your eyes. Okay, can everybody see? That was not a trick question. All right. So, yep, that's me, Matilda Greentree. You're probably wondering how I got here wearing this ludicrous costume on my wedding day, April 2nd, 1826. Well, it's a long story. It all started in Washington City in 1812. Oops. So she ended up moving to the experimental community of New Harmony, Indiana, and she was one of the brides in a double wedding ceremony that was the first ceremony that they had in this experimental commune of New Harmony, Indiana. And we'll hear a little bit more about her, but actually, she did sew herself a white wedding gown. And she was wearing it on the morning of her wedding when she got the word that she should come like this. So she changed out of her white gown. I don't know which one it was most like, but one of those, and put this on. So that is one part of her story. Okay. And you'll find out if you read the book how that all happened and came to be. So half of the book about half of the book is set in the District of Columbia, so Washington City and Georgetown. It follows Matilda from when she was 4 years old and after the death of her first mother until her honeymoon when she was 18. So she grows up in the capital city, and at that time, the Capitol building was still under construction at first. Then it was burned by the British in 1814. And then by 1825, when I have her going in there again, this brand new copper dome was on the Capitol. It's not the dome that we have now on the nation's capital. It was a different one. And did you know that there was an oculus in that copper dome? You can see it. It was open to the elements, 8 yards across, and came down onto the vestibule. And under that, there's like this whispering gallery where in certain parts you can hear. And so that echo chamber idea, it really was an echo chamber then. So you get to know the Capitol a little bit through the story. What was it like to grow up in the early 1800s in America? Well, has anyone here gone to a school where your mother was the only teacher? Couple maybe? All right. So Matilda's mother ran a boarding school out of their house, and she attended that school. One of the big ways that girls were taught in that time was by sewing samplers. And so they learned to sew by creating a sampler. Has anyone ever made a sampler? Has anyone ever embroidered? Yeah. Okay, cool. So I have a sampler back there that you can take a look at. Matilda recalled in her journal receiving a doll like what you see here when she was 4 years old. These were called tuck comb dolls because they'd have a little painted comb on the top of their head, or Grodnerdle doll, or they were wooden peg dolls. So if you can see, their joints are fully articulated and they could sit down. She had a little chair and table and they could sit down. I was so mad when I grew up that my Barbies couldn't sit. And I think it was like 1967, I'm dating myself now, 1967 when Barbie dolls were as fully articulated as these wooden peg dolls that Matilda had. But I have a sample of a reproduction of a wooden peg doll that you can actually make. I have instructions there for how you can pretty easily make one, so you can check that out. So the president's house, and when Washington was burned in 1814 by the British, the president's house, as they called it then instead of the White House, did burn along with the Capitol. And there's a scene in the book where Matilda, there was actually, did you know that there was a storm? God sent a storm to save Washington and put out the fires. And so that's recreated in the book. And so Matilda tours the city after the city has been burned. And then she's also able to go into the White House in 1818 when it's been refurbished. And so you kind of get a little tour of the refurbished White House. And then again, she goes in there in 1825. So again, it's just kind of a nice way to follow along how the changes happened in Washington, D.C. So Matilda actually, the real Matilda, lived most of her childhood in the yellow areas. And you can see she grew up like just a couple of blocks from the president's house. In the book, I have spaced it out a little bit and put her in the red areas just to give a little bit more variety and to show a little bit more of the area. Some of the landmarks that are mentioned in the book, Columbian Inn or City Tavern in Georgetown. I have Matilda living about half a mile from there. This was a historic building that was frequented during the Revolutionary period by our founding fathers, and that still stands in Georgetown today. And the Six Buildings is another landmark that marked the edge, the western edge of the Washington city. And that is where I have Matilda's millinery shop that she started when she was only 17. I placed in the Six Buildings. It could have been a little bit farther down Pennsylvania Avenue, but we know that when she was only 17, she started her own millinery shop on Pennsylvania Avenue, which would have been just a couple of blocks from the White House. Matilda wrote or mentioned in her journal fabric and clothing and fashion a lot. She was really a sewing fanatic. So she mentioned different kinds of cloth. Unfortunately for her, her mother only allowed her to wear white, like the little girl here, for the first 6 years that she lived with her adopted mother. And she just longed for colorful dresses, calico or gingham. And when you find out, when you read the book, why her mother dressed her in white all those years, you will probably be as outraged as Matilda was when you find out. But eventually her mother gave in and took her to the dry goods store and let her pick out her own cloth. And so there's a scene in there where she does that. So I have some samples of silk and calico and gingham, and also the white muslin that her mom dressed her in, and the ticking, which is this lovely material here. So there's some mirrors there, and you can drape yourself with some of those fabrics and feel the difference of the fabrics. So you can have that kind of shopping experience that Matilda has in the book. At one point, well, Matilda's second mother, I'm not giving away anything away that's already not on the back of the book, okay? So Matilda's second mother passed away, and so she had to leave her mother's school, and she was sent to school in Leesburg, Virginia, with a Methodist minister and his wife. His wife was the teacher. The Old Stone Church there, that would have been the church that Matilda was at, and the next building is the parsonage, and Matilda lived, the real Matilda lived in that parsonage. That church is on the very first property that Methodists owned anywhere in the US. So that's kind of interesting. And there's an archaeological site there now, but the parsonage where Matilda lived, the brick part still stands. So she did not have a good experience there. And she was rescued by a family by the name of McCabe and brought to McCabe's ordinary. An ordinary, if you've never heard that term, is a tavern. So McCabe was a medical doctor, and they ran it as a tavern. His parents ran it as a tavern, but when Matilda was there, it was not a tavern. But that building still stands, and people from the Revolutionary War era were there as well. And George Washington was known to have stopped there, and when he did, he ordered greens and jowls, whatever that is. So while Matilda is in the book, while she's living there, she learns all kinds of developmental things. She learns how to forage for herbs, medicinal herbs. She learns how to use them to treat children who have malaria. She learns how to pour tea for elegant ladies while she's in Virginia. And she also learns how important a trousseau is. Now, I did not realize, I thought in our modern day lingo, a trousseau is like your honeymoon wardrobe, right? the clothing that you take on your honeymoon. Oh, in 1820s, it was so much more than that. So Matilda has a little conversation with her friend, Estelle, about what is this trousseau, oops, and why it's so important. So Estelle says, Mother says my trousseau must be as impressive as my dowry to make an acceptable match. And with my slow and sloppy needlework, it may take years to get it done. Matilda says, I know nothing about trousseaux. Sarah Thorpe was working on hers, but I don't even know what's involved. Estelle says, in addition to your own stockings, drawers, chemises, you must prepare bed sheets, pillowcases, blankets, towels, tablecloths, napkins, aprons, and handkerchiefs. Oh, and of course, day dresses, nightgowns, collars, shawls, and hats, and a wedding gown. Matilda says that would take years and money, so much money. But father can't afford a dowry, so I will never marry. So having this trousseau was a big thing that a woman brought into the marriage to get the family set up. And that was like an important part of the dowry that young women had. I have some things back there you can look at that would be sample things that a woman would be putting in her trousseau. But how long would it take you to sew all that stuff? In the book, I talk a lot about Matilda's advanced needlework skills, and the type of work she would have been doing was called drawn thread work. Has anyone ever done this? Okay, so you can see some samples back there of what that looks like, and imagine how it's done based on this picture here. So Matilda ends up going to Baltimore to do a millinery apprenticeship. And apprenticeships in the US, in America, had a very bad reputation, right? And very much deservedly so. So here's what Matilda's was like. Pay somebody to let you do all the tasks that they hate. Work for 3 years, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and sleep on a pallet in the attic. So in that red building there, those upper dormer rooms, this is the exact same type of building that Matilda would have lived in, and slept just on a bare mattress in the attic where there was no heat and no air conditioning for 3 years. So apprentices had to babysit, do the shopping, tend the fires, cook, and clean, right? All the time they're supposed to be learning how to do this trade, but they have to spend all this time doing all this other stuff. And eventually learn to make hats. And then in Matilda's case, the mistress disappeared for weeks on end without it telling anybody where she was. Well, they thought she went to Washington City, but that's all they knew. And so she's gone, and Matilda is in charge of the mistress's children, and basically has to work through the night to get enough money to buy breakfast for the mistress's children. So, and that part was all true from Matilda's history. A millinery shop sold more than hats. It sold aprons and ribbons and other accessories, but most of the things were all sold on credit. So husbands would come to the shop once a quarter and say, what does my wife owe? Okay, and then pay off the bill that the wife had accumulated over that quarter. But that means you have no money coming in. So when Matilda was left alone, her mistress took off, she had no way really of bringing in cash. And so she has to use her wits and really get creative on how to bring in the hard money in order literally to buy breakfast for the mistress's children the next morning. So you can find out how that all turns out. So she gets through her millinery apprenticeship and she sets up her own shop, and it's successful, and she repays her loan. And then what would possess her to want to leave all of that she worked so hard for, to go 1,000 miles west into the wilderness to this experimental community of Robert Owen, which was like some type of promised land. Well, you'll have to read the book to find out why she decided to do that. But they hitched up the horse, Fanny. This is not them. There are no photography in her day. But something like this type of a wagon, one horse they went with, tied a canopy over the top, and went 260 miles overland on the national road to the Ohio River. And then it should have taken like 12 to 17 days, but they actually made it in 7 days. They really made great time. But when they got to Wheeling, they intended to take a steamship the rest of the way to New Harmony down the Ohio River. They still had 700 miles to go down the Ohio, but the water was too low and the steamships weren't even running. So they planned to go in fancy style, but what they ended up doing was hiring a little boat, a skiff, and then they ran into a horrible storm. Matilda almost gets struck by lightning, and they abandon their little skiff and go onto a keelboat and go the rest of the way by keelboat. They make a fun stop in Cincinnati, and you can find out why Cincinnati was called Porkopolis. Porkopolis. It's kind of an interesting city at the time. So eventually they got to New Harmony. Again, what they were promised, Robert Owen, who was setting up this experimental commune, was telling everyone, we're going to build this this ideal city. It's going to be a parallelogram. It's going to be all self-contained, kind of like a 15-minute city, you know? You ever heard of that? And everything's going to be highest functioning science and all the modern conveniences. But when they actually got there, it was just a little town that some German commune, group of Christians had come over from Germany and built this little town and sold it because they were very successful and they were moving on. But they sold it to Robert Owen, and it was just kind of a little rustic town, not what people were promised. And because it was a communal experiment, some people didn't want to work and some people did want to work, and so there was a constant infighting among these different factions that they had, and they always were arguing about how the town is going to be run. But Matilda did not really mind any of that. She didn't pay attention, because the first night she was there, she met Philip Price. And from there on, their relationships just kind of blossomed until you saw the wedding day. Now you can still go to historic New Harmony. The town is still there. There are over 20 buildings that are still there from the 1810 time period when Matilda, and 20 when Matilda was there. Bob and I have stayed twice. This is called the Poet's House. Come on. Who wouldn't want to stay there? But it's like the historic, the way that they built the houses, and still one of the original houses there. The community number 2, that is where Matilda, it was the boarding school, and Matilda worked in the kitchen in the boarding school. That building is still there. New Harmony is famous for its labyrinth, which you see in the middle. And there's an interesting story in the book about what happens at the labyrinth to Matilda. The brick church where Matilda got married does not stand anymore, but at the museum there's a complete model of the town, so you can see what everything would have looked like in that day. So then it came down to her wedding day. And if you aren't married now and hope to marry someday, and I hope you do, I hope that your wedding day is not as traumatic as Matilda's was. So she did end up changing out of something like this into something like this, horror of horrors, right? But that wasn't the worst of it. Just probably a few weeks later, Matilda was almost struck by lightning in a really, uh, really crazy event. So that was real, and that's depicted in the novel. So when it rains, it pours. How long would you want to stay? Oops, sorry. How long would you want to stay in a place where all this kind of stuff was happening to you? Well, they had a chance, Philip and Matilda, to go on a honeymoon to the English prairies, which is about 30 miles north of New Harmony. It's in Illinois, and Bob and I have been there too. They stayed at Cauliflower Lodge, which is depicted there, and the scene next door that was sketched by an artist like within a month of the time that Matilda was there. So I took that sketch. This is colorized by, thank you, Grok, but colorized. But I took that kind of setting and had someone create the cover of the book for me. So they have some time to think about what they want to do as a couple when they're on the English prairies, and you'll find out as you read the book what they decide to do. But now I'd like to share with you just a little passage from the novel. So Matilda found out in her life that bad things could quickly change to good things, and sometimes good things could quickly change to bad things. So you'll see some of that here in this section. So this is while they're going down the Ohio River toward New Harmony. We agreed to keep on. Aunt Thorpe cooked another meal on board, which we ate while we were drifting with the current. As the sun set ahead, the nearly full moon's celestial glow reflected off the glittering surface of the Ohio. Bathed in its golden beams, we skimmed along as if in a dream. As the warm air freshened, nature's choir singers competed in a deafening cacophony from the high bluffs on either side and the wooded riverbanks. Whip poor Will. Katie did. Katie didn't. From a high branch, a hoot owl asked, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you, owl?" Joseph yelled in response, "Mother does. How about you?" We laughed and laughed. Hear that? Henry Gordon cocked his head. Bullfrogs warning. I smiled at the deep croaking. What do they say? Knee deep, knee deep. He lowered his voice to the cellar, mimicking their voices. Better go round. Mary snorted, Joseph guffawed, and we all doubled over, clutching our sides. As the concert continued, it was punctuated by the yapping of foxes, the mournful trill of a screech owl, or the hissing of a raccoon or a possum. When we rounded a little bend, a woman's frantic scream chilled our bones. Stop, I cried, someone's in trouble. Just the opposite, Henry chuckled. That's a lady mountain lion searching for a mate. Joseph scoffed. With that voice, she'll drive her suitors off in the other direction. After that, we settled back, lost in reverie as the background music played on. 3 pleasant days and nights passed. We plowed the moonlit river until 8 or 9 each night before finding a place to bed down in a nearby farmhouse. On the 4th day from wheeling, we boarded the skiff as a crimson sun rose against a deep rose-colored backdrop. Henry stared at it for a long minute, then grabbed his oar with determination. The air hung thick and heavy like a sodden shawl we couldn't cast off. As the day wore on, the feathery white clouds merged into a sheet of gray, shading the sun. The blue waters of the Ohio turned ashen gray, and our clothes clung to our bodies in the oppressive air. Late in the afternoon, Joseph shouted from the bow, "Henry, see that wall of clouds ahead?" Henry eyed the glassy water. His expression was stoic. "Aye, lad, been watching that for a while. Veer to starboard." Aunt Thorpe stowed some dishes she'd been drying. She sniffed. "Smells like rain." My eyes locked not on the towering purplish black clouds Joseph had noticed, but on the horizon. Below the black wall, the sky was sickly green, like a week-old bruise. My blood ran cold. That's how the sky had looked the day God sent a storm to save Washington. Before I could speak, a booming crack of thunder sounded, then reverberated off the cliffs. Mary screamed and Aunt Thorpe gasped, clutching her chest. At the same moment, a cold blast of air whooshed through the boat, from bow to stern, lowering the temperature from hot to cold in an instant. The boat began bouncing and rocking in the choppy waves. I grabbed for one of the awnings for support. Put your back into it. Beach her now. Henry's holler caught in the wind, but Joseph didn't need instruction. He strained against the oars furiously as water splashed his face. Bail, women, bail, Henry shouted. Aunt Thorpe, Mary, and I fumbled for a bucket and 2 pots. We started scooping water and tossing it overboard, only to have furious whitecaps rise over the sides, mocking our efforts. My heart pounded furiously. Our lives were at stake. Our little bark thrashed wildly from side to side. It could sink or capsize at any moment. More thunder growled and boomed as jagged lightning lit the gray-black sky. Rain pelted not down but sideways, stinging our faces, and violent gusts caused the awning to flap and shudder. The boat jolted, and I tumbled into Mary. I looked up to see a large wooden wall before us. Our skiff was beached behind a keelboat. Abandon her, Henry bellowed above the howling wind and thunder. Look lively now, bowman, hold her steady. I jumped onto the silt first. I planted my boots into the slippery mud, then steadied Mary and Aunt Thorpe when they hopped overboard. Joseph grabbed our line and hopped into the water. Henry pointed to a narrow plank that connected the riverbank to the keelboat's running board. Ladies, to the stage. Henry cupped his hand to hail a young man who was rushing back up the stage after tying a line around a tree. Ho, the boat! Where is your patron? A taller, gruffer man appeared above us on the deck. Who's there? Ho, patron! We're a party with 3 ladies, Henry shouted, touching his hat. May we take harbor? We'll pay in labor and coins. The man waved us toward the craft as another crack of thunder pierced the air like musket fire. Aunt Thorpe, Mary, and I rushed toward the stage, sliding down the embankment and tripping over roots and driftwood. As I reached the base of the stage, I swatted at a tingle along my jaw. Even after swiping the rain and mud from my cheeks, the buzzing sensation continued. It spread down my arms and legs, and the hairs on the back of my neck bristled. I licked my lips against the taste of copper on my tongue. A few yards beyond the bow of the keelboat, a towering white sycamore, as tall as the Capitol dome, glowed eerily against the churning dark clouds, stretching its white limbs out over the tumultuous river. A jagged blue-white spear split the sky above the tree. For a half second, the tree emitted a ghostly glow. Crack! An ear-splitting explosion rent the tree to bits, and fiery fragments flew out in all directions, raining down toward the keelboat as dozens of flashes along the keelboat's side lit up like fireflies.